Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition. Today we're going to talk about feeling alone. Why does the ascension process, when we start ascending our consciousness, start to feel lonely? Now, there are times in this process where we want to be alone. You cannot really connect with yourself and with your soul if you're with a lot of people. And we've seen that in the collectives over the last year, people exiting out of a lot of busier situations and moving on to something else. But there comes a time, a lot different parts of the journey, you're going to have this feeling of wanting to connect with people, but it just doesn't feel right. And it still feels kind of lonely. Now, when we're really in our human aspects, when we're in our human bodies, and we're still living from a lot of that human programming, and we haven't really started recoding our DNA and moving through the ascension process, it's different. You know, we are trying to whole with things and people. That's what we do. You know, that's the whole purpose of having all this stuff in our life, because it makes us feel like we're trying to find the part of us that's missing. That's why we're branching out to so many things. But when you start leaving those realities behind, you have to let all that stuff go, because you start to realize that none of that's going to make you whole inside. It's not possible. It only can come from inside out. We can utilize different things to activate different parts of us, but it's still us. It's always going to be us. It always begins and ends with us. So if it begins and ends with us, why do I feel lonely? Why do you feel like, oh, I really want to connect with someone, but every time I do, it just doesn't feel right? We want to have the level of connections that match a level of connection you've connected with yourself. And that's a lot of words. If you have connected with yourself on a very deep level, you want that connection with every connection you have. The issue that can come in is if the other person hasn't connected to that level, they can't connect with anyone at that level because they're not connected at that level. So we'll find ourselves sort of going out and trying to connect with people, but not really feeling like anything works anymore. It used to be so much easier. I find myself saying that a lot. It used to be a lot easier to connect with people than it feels for me now. Now it feels a lot harder for me. Like I'll go out and connect for short-term things, you know, chatting with people here and there, but it really doesn't feel like a connection. So you kind of feel like you're kind of alone in the thing for a while, and for a while you are. I mean, that's part of it, really. You don't really have anyone else to kind of back you up, and you're not supposed to, because it's supposed to be a sovereign journey to show you don't need that stuff. And there can come a time when some of that stuff comes back in, but we're not really controlled by the outside stimuli anymore. You know you've ascended to a certain place in your process when you're not really controlled by the outside anymore. Nothing really happens on the outside bothers you. It might aggravate you for a minute or two, might trigger something, but for the most part, you're not dictated by the outside environment. It doesn't get you like it used to. You really don't care. You kind of feel detached from it for a while, depending on what phase you're in. There's a lot of different phases where you feel very detached. But when we start going out and trying to find connections, it can feel challenging. Now, there's also a part of it where we've disconnected so much from the old human realities, or our old human realities, that we didn't realize how busy they kept us. We didn't realize how they kept us from realizing how disconnected we were from ourselves. We were so busy in all of everyone else's stuff, we never really took the time to be with ourselves. So there can be a part of that too. So depending on where you are in the process, is going to be a lot of different reasons why you start to feel the connection, the wanting to connect, and everything you do doesn't really. And then I'm not going to get into like the sexual connection, because that's really not what I'm talking about here. It's more just any type of connection with someone. It's harder. It gets harder because they have to be at the same space you are with your connection for you to feel that connection. If not, you just don't feel it. And it feels kind of like, oh, there's really no point to this. I'm not really feeling that connection. And in a way, it forces us to go deeper in. And another thing it can kind of make us do is trying to force connections with people that aren't where we are. And that's not really a judgment because everyone's where they're supposed to be, but just to explain, we'll kind of look for connections in people and try to force those connections a little bit because we just want to connect. And I think we've all been there. Even it's kind of we used to do it in certain ways in our human realities, and we'll kind of start to do it a certain way, but the energy behind it's different than it was when we were in our human realities. It can be a kind of a similar press. You're kind of pressing it. I just want to connect, so I'm going to press it with these people to see if maybe I can make it work. I had a teacher that would say, if there's a but at the end of the sentence, it's not good. You're already out on it the minute you say it could work, but if only, but if they didn't do this, but it'd be fine. You start to compromise a lot. So you'll find you'll start to compromise on the connection a little bit just because you want to have a connection with someone. You really don't. You care, but you get to a point where you just try to force it. And that's where you really can get into a lot of very disjointed connections, and they feel miserable when you're in them. You really can't really describe the feeling unless you're in it. And then you'll know what I'm talking about when you feel that and you're like, gee, it just doesn't work anymore. And there'll be times, no matter where we are in our process, where you used to connect with certain people, and now you just can't find it anymore with certain people because you've gone to a different place or maybe they've gone to a different place and you're just not there yet. And everyone's where they're supposed to be. It just can be challenging when we start to try to force it. Just know, and this is what I always tell myself, the connections will come when they're supposed to. You don't have to force them, even though it is a part of us that wants to. I know I will feel that sometimes too. You try to force the connections. You don't have to force them. When they're supposed to be there, they'll be there. And we just have to busy ourselves with other things until then. And it can be kind of a one-man band, a one-woman band. Sexuality really doesn't matter in this case. Just might be you for a while. It might be you for a long while. And you look around, and when you've been going through ascension for a while, and there's nobody there. You're doing everything. Anything has to be done. Sometimes I'll look at people who have someone else to help them do something. And I'll be like, oh, that's nice. They have someone else to help them do that. And for me, I feel like, oh, it's always me. I got to do that. Now I got to do that. And I got to go do that. So just look at the energy you're coming from. And if there's a need there to connect, it's not going to lead you down the road you want it to lead you down. So just be aware when you're feeling that need. Look at that need. What do I want from this? Because normally what will happen is we take the other person out of it. Just like we did when we were human in a sense. We kind of start to revert back to that. Well, we don't really care about the other person. I don't really care if you want this really deep connection. I want this really deep connection, so I really don't care where you are. Even though I know you're really not ready for this and it's really not going to work for you, I'm just going to kind of keep playing this role because I want this. When you start discounting the other person that you want to connect with and not really care, you've kind of taken them out of it and being like, well, why wouldn't you want to? It doesn't make any sense. You're coming from not the cleanest energy. It's not the purest energy. So sometimes we just have to check ourselves and keep practicing the art of intuition.